What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the same. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Tony Lyons of Alphabet Creative. And Tony, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. Since this is part of the Top Agency series, the one I did with Ian Garlic was very interesting. He runs videocasestory.com. He helps people tell their customer stories. He talked about some stories of where he got that entrepreneurial spirit of his dad, started a restaurant, and they had live dolphins in that restaurant, Tony. Now, he's in Orlando now. That would be weird. Not as weird as his dad's restaurant was in Wisconsin, having live dolphins. That's really weird, okay? But lots of cool stories like that. Check it out. I also did one with, actually two with Jason Swank, and Jason Swank actually talked about building up his agency to over 8 figures and selling it, and then his new company that has been buying up agencies and how they've been doing that and the valuation, the landscape, and everything like that. And obviously, he's got a group of top-level agency owners that collaborate and help each other as well. So check that episode out. More on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. And we do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. You know, Tony, we call ourselves kind of the magic elves that work in the background to make it look easy for the host and the company so they could just run their company, create great relationships, and create great content. And for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com and learn more. And I'm excited to introduce Tony Lyons. He's president and chief strategy officer at Alphabet. You can find them at alphabetcreative.com. Tony's career spans over 26 years. I don't mean to date you, Tony, at all, but
more than that, actually.
More than that. Okay. 29 years? How long?
Mm-hmm. It's north of 30, but whatever.
North of 30. Okay.
We can move on.
But you're not that gray yet, so it's good. North of 30 in the advertising and design industry on both sides of the Atlantic. And Alphabet Creative is an advertising, design, and new media creative consultancy. And their focus is really communication that's clear, concise, and that messages are delivered from a unique angle. And Tony, you started as a cartoonist.
I did, yeah. So I got a job right out of high school. Actually, I did some college training, but I got a job right out of high school at a design studio, and it was the 80s, so computers weren't really a thing, at least in Ireland. Like they were beginning, like desktop Macs were beginning on North America, but it was pad and paper stuff, So got a job.
What did you want to do when you were younger? Did you want to be a cartoonist?
No, I was fascinated by advertising. Like I always was, because when I was growing up in Ireland, like there was only 2 channels I remember in the very beginning, and then we got 4, and then maybe 5. And so I wasn't really interested in the shows because it was all boring news stuff, but I was fascinated by the ads that happened between the shows, and Ireland in the 80s was it's still a rural country, but like it was extremely agricultural. So people watching news shows were farmers, and what are farmers interested in? They're interested in farm stuff, right? So animal pharmaceuticals, all this kind of stuff, which you think is boring, but these creative minds wrapped these stories around sort of Clint Eastwood looking characters walking into a saloon, kicking the door open with a bag of sheep dip over their shoulder and slamming it down on the table, and all of the bad guys looking around, and he'd be chewing a matchstick and stuff. And I just thought it was so absurdly funny but yet, really interesting. And I'm sure the production quality was absolutely terrible. But in my mind, as an 8 or 9-year-old, I thought it was really interesting, And then we got access to some of the British shows when we got BBC. And British advertising is, I think, probably at that time was the best in the world. It probably still is. I mean, I think certain markets in the States have caught up a little bit, but and some European markets. But the Brits have a very interesting sensibility and a very interesting sense of humor, and that translated into advertising. Like you can tell the culture of a country by looking at its advertising. You really can. It's a litmus test of the culture of that country, and they're funny. Like the Brits are funny, right? So the ads were funny and clever, and the jingles, stick with me today, even when I'm 53. I just came back from Ireland. I was over for a family wedding, and I met with some buddies and we had a beer. And, we still sing the jingles from the TV spots when we were kids as a joke, and it's so resonant, and they're deeply embedded mnemonics in our brains, which I find really, really interesting.
Who have you studied over the years in advertising that you like? It could be actually a mentor that or not. By the way, like you were saying, I think if you can make, I guess, animal pharmaceuticals interesting, then you can do anything. But who have you studied?
Well, it would be less individuals. There'd be collections of people for sure, and the work of certain agencies. But really, my I guess you could call it a field of study or interest would be the biology of why people make decisions, right? And I've worked with some neuroscientists at some universities here in Ottawa, at the mental health center here too, and I've discussed that pretty much at length, that like why people make decisions, and it's a whole, like, neuromarketing is a whole field that I don't claim to be an expert in, but over the years, what I've really gained a lot of interest in and done a bunch of research in was the triggers of why people actually do things, like how you can influence behavior with messaging and marketing. And I think it really behooves anybody who's trying to make somebody do something or feel something or behave a certain way to understand, like, well, what can I say to make them change their mind or to behave a certain way? So, I've broken it down into very simple, I guess, a mnemonic that we work through with our clients. And I've tested it, and I've tested it with some of the neuroscientists, and I have a podcast actually myself called Flipping Over Rocks, if I can give it a bit of a plug.
Yeah, I've checked it out. Flipping Over Rocks, yeah.
And I spoke with artists, I've spoken with neuroscientists, I've spoken with professors, and really trying to get to the root of how creativity can drive, what is creativity, first of all, and how can it drive decision making for people as it relates to brand marketing. Yeah.
So we'll talk about the mnemonic.
Okay, so what we call it is trust, love, and logic, right? If you think about the things that are going to drive human behavior or a decision, think about it, first of all, I need to trust you. That means, and trust doesn't mean in the true sense of the word, I need to at least recognize you, right? So that's how top of funnel advertising works. It probably won't make you buy something right there and then, but when you're in a position to buy it and you're ready to do it, you will remember that brand, that product. And because you recognize it, you're more inclined to engage with it. The second one is love. And that really is just about creating an emotional connection in the mind of the consumer. So that could be joy, it could be surprise, it could be delight, but it could also be fear. Fear is a very good driver of human behavior. In fact, a lot of neuroscientists say it's the only true driver of human behavior. And I used to challenge that because I'm a hopeful person and I don't like negative advertising and I don't like that kind of stuff. So I challenged people on it, and I said to the neuroscientists, well, if fear is the only real driver of behavior, well, why does Nike or Adidas or Apple create these joyful messages and try to get you to engage with them with this surprise and delight. And the simple answer is it's the fear of missing out. If I don't have it, I'm afraid that I'll be left out of the tribe that does have it. And that's the reason. It is really about fear at the end of the day, you know. But as much as if I know you, and as much as if you surprise and delight me, I still have to have a rational decision. I still have to rationalize my decision through logic, right? Now, most often, what people don't like to admit is that logical or that rationale is a post rationale. So they'll say, I bought the BMW because it is the safest vehicle, it's reliable. No, you didn't. You bought the BMW because you wanted to have a BMW as a status symbol. That's why you bought it. And you're post-rationalizing it with this, fake logic. But there is a lot of times where, actually most of the time, where people are looking for some form of specific, pragmatic, rational, logical decision or logical reason to make their decision, but it's much lower on the scale than the other two of trust and love. They all play a role, and depending on where you are in the food chain, or who you are, or what you're trying to get people to do, you need to pull one of those triggers more or less. But you have to recognize all of them, and you have to recognize them because they are the ecosystem of decision making. So I love that. That's kind of like, that's the hypothesis. It's not really a hypothesis. It's pretty well established, I think, in marketing parlance and in neuromarketing as well.
We'll talk through a few examples in a second of how you put that into play. But when we were talking before you record, I thought it was interesting. You said something about repositioning and repositioning yourselves. And you also said you used to give away something and now you charge for it.
Yep.
Can you talk about what you were giving away in that decision to start actually charging for it?
Yeah. So designers, creative writers, ad agencies, people that deliver creative services, if you're any good at your job, you should be asking an awful lot of questions before you put pen to paper, right? You should have primary and secondary research, desk research, whatever research you can gather to get as much data as you can. But you really need to talk to an awful lot of people. Like if you're doing, for example, I put it in the context of a brand development for a not-for-profit organization. So the way we look at it is the brand already exists inside that organization, right? If you're inventing something, it's probably not true. What you want to do is uncover the truth and then put a wrapper around it in the form of a brand program so that you can codify it and systemize it and make it consistent over time, and then give people the framework to continually look at all of their messaging and their activities and anything that they do vis-a-vis their internal audiences or their external audiences through the lens of that brand. In order to do that, you need to do a whole bunch of stakeholder engagement, right? You need to talk to senior leadership, partners, government partners, maybe. You need to talk to public. You need to talk to customers. You need to talk to the lowest person on the rung and the highest person on the rung and everybody in between. When you do that through a directed stakeholder engagement program, you'll start to see key themes emerge that will inform the narrative of the brand. Right? Not all of them are positive. As a matter of fact, some of them are negative, but that's good. It's good to see those things, right? Because then you can figure out how we can, assuage people's fears or, turn off a mechanism or a process that's not working in favor of something that is more positively received. And then you can start to build that brand narrative. So that's what you should be doing to develop a brand before you even design anything or write anything. You need to understand the essence of it. Good brand companies do that. And we were doing it, but we were just wrapping that into, the output. Like we'd say, we'll do 3 days of stakeholder engagement, and that they wouldn't even be a line item on the invoice. It'd just be part of the brand development. Well, the reality is that that part of the process is the most valuable part of the process that they're going to get, because more than likely nobody has ever done that for that organization before. Nobody has done psychotherapy on that organization, you know? And the reason I say the word psychotherapy is that some organizations try to develop brand narratives from within. That is literally like doing psychotherapy on yourself. You can't do it. You need an external person to point out your flaws and challenge you on things, right? And you need the voice or the ear of an external consultant to give a level playing field to people who might not say a negative thing to their manager or to somebody more senior, because it could affect their employment future, right? But it's all confidential when they work with us. So it's very open, and you really get some really juicy stuff. So we now will just do that component we will do that component as a stage of a brand development. And if the client then wants to continue to work with us, hopefully they will. We will then start building out the messaging framework, and we will use our methodology for doing that. We have we kind of proprietize the methodology for doing that. And only after that's done does the shape of what it looks like and sounds like and feel like start to uncover itself. But it has to be built on that foundation of uncovering the truth, a deep understanding, building the messaging framework or the narrative, and then showing what that looks like and what it feels like. If you go through that full process, it's pretty much bulletproof, because nobody within the organization can say they weren't asked their opinion, and that's not true. And nobody outside of the organization who's going to consume those messages will see something and go, this is completely out of left field. I don't know what they're talking about. That you're basically telling people what they want to hear because it's the truth. And then you're just putting a system around it so that it can be consistent over time.
Yeah, it's coming from them, so they can't say where'd this come from, because it came from you, actually. Yeah.
I just made it up, you know.
What it makes me think about, Tony, is what stuff we're doing, or the people I talk to, that is not a line item, right? Like that we're doing that is highly valuable, that is just kind of baked in, but it could be something separate. How did you then reposition yourselves using that? Yeah.
So the beauty of doing a deep stakeholder engagement and you know, uncovering this essence of a brand is that you can demonstrate to senior leadership in organizations that brand is a transformative thing, right? If you want transformative change, you can use your brand as a tool for that to happen. So you get the ear of C-suite, CEO, CFO, COO, all of the big dogs, right? As opposed to, and no offense to the comms or marketing department, they're typically viewed within a lot of organizations as more of a tactical have to have, as opposed to a strategic must have, you know? So what we've seen over the years, and the agency world is seeing it, is the rise of the big five or the big four management consulting firms and their engagement in our world, right? The Deloitte's, KPMG's, in Canada, EY, I don't know if you have EY, even PwC, you know, they're now offering strategic marketing services and doing a lot of similar things that agencies used to do. The problem for agencies is that agencies deal with marketing managers. Deloitte deals with CEOs, right? So when you want something to change within an organization, you got to talk to the boss. So they're the only person that can make that change happen. And when you uncover the truth of a brand and you get everybody to agree on the strategic direction of that brand, which should obviously align with the strategic business goals, you know, that's the whole point. But it can also adjust the strategic business goals. It can make people, it's a sober second thought. It can make people reconsider the strategic direction of the organization. When you're having those conversations, you're now acting more like a strategic consultant than you are like the deliverer of services, which is what an ad agency is. And I don't want to be an ad agency anymore because, frankly, it's a tactic that is valuable sometimes, but it's a lot of the time it's not. And a lot of people think that brand messaging is advertising, and it's not. Brand is about actually changing how your company behaves and then talking about it. The simplest way I can put it is that good advertising will make a bad restaurant go out of business faster. So a lot of people, when they hear that and they go like, let me say that a few times, I don't quite get what you're saying. It's like, you have to be what you say you are, because as soon as you're not, what's the first thing somebody's going to do? Is they're going to go tell everybody else that you're not what you say you are. And everything you've done to create that message of saying what you are has now done yourself a complete disservice. So how about looking at yourself introspectively and being better towards in the avenues that you need to be better in based on your strategic plan and your strategic goals, putting a story around that and allowing the research through that stakeholder engagement to influence not only the story, but influence what you're actually doing as well.
Tony, I like what you're saying with the repositioning. One, you help companies reposition, so kind of turn the tables for yourself. But I like you're thinking about how we want to be in the arena with the management consulting companies. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. And being in that arena, one, I mean, if you're an agency and let's just talk about pricing, right? Like for the same project, and I'm making this up, I have zero idea, but just from the people I know that have worked in corporate, one was telling me a couple of weeks ago, like they may charge $1 million for a project. And I'm like thinking, well, if an agency were to do that, they'd probably charge $10,000.
Probably.
And maybe if that, right? And I'm not saying it's apples to apples, but there's a lot of things that were comparable there. How do you think about pricing when you're rolling out this new? It's not new, but it's as like a separate line item that's usually built into the project.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's better for us for sure. Because when you get higher in the food chain, you have to deliver higher value services, right? So it's not about just repositioning. You actually have to, you have to deliver, and that delivery is based on research. It's also based on a strategic advisory model too, based on other similar clients that we work with, and we can demonstrate success with those clients, and you can call those people and ask them and all this kind of stuff. But, it's the agency model is broken, and here's why. Really, the ad agency model is not based on the delivery of consulting services or creative. It's based on an agency's ability to sell as much media as it can and get as many points off that media as it can, right? So with the aggregation of those advertising agency conglomerates like the WPPs and the Publicis and all of these giant global firms, there's no way that an independent agency can compete with that. So I don't want to play that game. I don't want to be in that race, because it's a race to the basement. Because essentially, like, if you want to make 10 points, well, they'll take 8 points. If you want to make 8 points, they'll make 6 points off $100,000 or $1 million, right? So that's not the game that I want to play. And to be honest, I don't fully believe in the mechanism anymore either, because there's so much waste and fraud in advertising now, and it's extremely difficult to. I mean, as much as digital reporting, people say it's down to the click, it's really not. Like, it's like there is a whole bunch of unknowns in there too. And the Googles and Facebooks of the world and Twitters or X of the world, they keep their cards pretty close to their chest as well. So it is as much as we are as open as we possibly can be with our clients, and they can see the reporting, the numbers don't always match up, and we can't tell them why. We don't know why. They some hundreds of thousands of impressions disappear, and I can't tell you why, and neither can Facebook. So I go, there's something funny going on there, and I don't like the model from a finance point of view, and I don't like the model just from an integrity point of view either. So I think what I want to be is higher in the food chain and advising senior leadership on what the narrative is and how that narrative can get codified and systemized. And then if you want us to disseminate that or promote that, we will help you do that. But you can work with other people to do that too at the same time, right? So I think that when you're having simply put, if you're having conversations at C-suite, the hourly rate is better than if you're having conversations with a marketing department. They're higher value conversations.
So when you're thinking of pricing it, are you thinking of pricing it how many hours it's going to take to deliver on it? Or is it more of a set, here it is for us to do this whole, strategic brand consulting strategy?
Yeah. So we operate in a fixed price scenario. And, there's pros and cons, right? It's up to us to hit our numbers, right? But what I don't want to be doing is I don't want to be a taxi. I don't want to put the meter on and for the clients to be continually watching it and hoping that they get there before their budget runs out. That's not the relationship that I want with our clients. We have long-term relationships, 10, 12 years, which is really unheard of in our industry. But the reason for that is that we're straight with them. We make mistakes. So for sure we make mistakes, but we own up to it. Anything financial is entirely transparent as it relates to spending their budget. So if I tell them it's going to cost $20,000, that's an approximation of an aggregate of some of my time, CEO time, senior strategist time, developer time. So we'll build the estimate based on time for sure, but it's up to us to keep ourselves honest. They know that they're going to spend $20,000. Sometimes we go over, sometimes we're under. But at the end of the day, I can sleep better at night by not nickel and diming my clients over, we went 5 hours over budget on a project. I don't want that. I don't want that for my suppliers. If somebody's doing something for me, and I don't want it to be have that relationship with my clients either.
So what services do you offer at Alphabet Creative?
Yeah, well, we offer strategic marketing consulting, so that's research and analysis of the research. We work with marketing, either leads or CMOs or marketing managers to, we challenge them on their strat plans, a lot of the time, and we will co-create a strategic plan. From there, we'll build out, a tactical set, like an actual plan. So here's the things that we need to do. And that can be, it could be some advertising, digital marketing, content marketing is a huge component of what we do right now. Obviously on the digital side, there's SEO components, there's the Google internet, there's all social media marketing, all those things. We do web and application development for our clients too. That's a big part of it. We do software integration, so CRM integration, if they have a particular need. Associations have quite specific needs as it relates to member retention and acquisition. So there are existing software tools that they might need to integrate into their ecosystem. So they're sometimes hard to do. We'll help them do that. So we'll write APIs and make sure that the data flow is, smooth throughout the whole customer journey. Give our clients a better line of sight as to who's doing what, when, and why. And we do custom technical application development as well. We also do some experiential marketing. We do communications programs, and obviously brand development. So creative services like design and brand development. So creating a brand narrative, putting a brand identity on top of that brand narrative and then promoting it.
When you first started Alphabet Creative, what was the initial offering? What were the services then?
I was a designer. I was a graphic designer, you know? And so that's me sitting in my spare bedroom. Like, you know, I'd left an agency. I moved from Ireland in 95. I had about 7 years experience at the time working in ad agencies. I moved to Ottawa in 95. I worked for an ad agency for about 5 years. And when I left, I was the associate creative director at that agency. And so pretty broad range of services, like, but mostly ad development, campaign development, you know. So I left and, you know, I was able to write and design ads, right? That's the thing. I could do both of those things. So I'm sure there's creatives rolling their eyes going, you're not doing either of them very well then in that case, but you know, I was pretty good at both of them. And I was not a bad designer. I'm not the world's best designer, but I'm not a bad designer. So I got by for a while. And then I landed a piece of business with a large Crown Corporation here. Crown Corporation is essentially a government department that's arm's length. And started doing a ton of design work, and I couldn't do it all. So I hired a couple of people.
How did you get the client?
Just relationship management. You know, somebody knows somebody. I tell you exactly how it went. Somebody who I knew from my previous job was working with a very large multinational ad agency out of Toronto. They were in this Crown Corporation, which will remain nameless. And they needed a sales sheet done for an insurance product that they were selling, right? And they couldn't get it done because the ad agency that they were working with wasn't really interested in doing that. And the process was tedious and expensive. So they called me. And it's so embarrassing. These numbers are so embarrassing. So I think from memory, it was like 2 hours of my time. And I think I said, I'm going to charge $120 an hour, which was seemed outrageous for a designer in whenever it was 2001, but it was about the going rate. So the bill was $240 for that thing, right? It was 2 hours of my time. I sent it off. They're delighted. Next thing, those floodgates of work started to come in. I was just completely inundated. 2.5 years later, it was probably $280,000 a year from the same client.
So maybe it was good that you charged that.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, that just comes down to, and I think it's a lesson for all good business people. Just treat people well, you know, treat your clients well, treat your employees well, be straight with people. Like, it's not you need to hustle in the sense that you need to work hard. And you do need to get an edge on people when you're in competitive situations. But, you know, it's not really a rat race. It shouldn't be, you know, business is humanity, and humans need to treat people with respect, you know. So I've always thought that. And we demand that our clients treat us with respect. And when they don't, there's conversations that happen, but, you know, it's seldom. But there are times where somebody loses their cool with a junior person for no reason, and it's not acceptable. We don't accept that. And similarly, we treat our clients with respect, with honesty, and tell them exactly what's happening and bring them into the fold and show them the process and be transparent with your financials and the whole thing. And I think if you operate like that, you can sleep well at night, and ultimately the universe will pay you back.
As you grew, Tony, what were some of the key hires, position-wise, that you put in place?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few for sure. Senior lead of technology for sure. Started out as a web developer. I don't know how to build I know what it takes to build websites. I can't code. I'm not a coder. You know, I know enough about relational databases to be a nuisance to engineers, but that's about it. So that was a key hire. Senior VP, which is now our CEO. That was probably the most most important hire over the last 23 years.
Hmm.
Creative director.
How did you decide to, by the way, we're looking at the alphabetcreative.com website. You could see here, but talk about the decision to elevate someone to CEO.
Yeah. So I'm a member of a business working group. It's in the States. It's called Vistage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Vistage.
Yeah. Vistage. Yeah. So in Canada, it's called TEC, TEC, the executive committee. And that membership of that organization has been transformational for me as an entrepreneur in a number of ways. One, it's, am I allowed to swear on this podcast, by the way?
Sure.
Okay. It totally calls you out on your own bullshit, like completely calls you out, which is great, because you can be a one man bullshit echo chamber very quickly if you're not careful. And it also sort of, because you're with similar entrepreneurs in similar situations, albeit different industries, everybody's looking for a way to grow and everybody's looking for what their exit should be, right? So, I mean, I'm probably young enough that I'm not thinking about an exit too seriously, but it's not that far away. And, I really needed to build a management team that could, help me take it to the next level and essentially have this machine called Alphabet work autonomously without me. So that's my goal. My personal goal is planned obsolescence, right? Like it should be for any business owner. In order to do that, you need to get the right bums and seats, right? And I feel like I've done a pretty good job of that over the years. And we have another hire joining next week, actually, which I'm really excited about. And that should also...
What position?
It's a director of client services and strategy. And she comes from more of a PR background, highly strategic thinker, deep expertise in digital development, amazing client relationship manager. So she's going to be able to, be a mentor to our client services team and our account management team, which currently is myself and the CEO. And but it's like we just wear too many hats. We're trying to take some hats off and give them to other people. And let go a little bit, and not lose sight of the vision of where we want to take the company, but, inject our vision and our culture and our values throughout the company, but allow other people to manage it in the way that they see fit, like by using our values and aligning with our vision. So I'm excited.
What were you looking for in a CEO? Because obviously, you could have, as you did, brought someone from within, or you could have got someone from the outside too.
They were from within. They'd been with us for 5 years, I think, at that point, as a VP of client services. Actually, what I was looking for was a strategic thinker, a natural leader, a mentor to younger people, highly organized, good financial business acumen. I have all of those things, but I don't want to do all of those things. It's not what gets me out of bed in the morning. What gets me out of bed is solving problems for people creatively, whether that's, whether it is an ad campaign or it's a piece of communication or a brand platform or even just some ideas on how to, build strategic partnerships to help fuel your business growth and stuff like that. So that's what excites me. The machine of operating a business as it relates to, all the admin, all the HR stuff, all the financial reporting is vitally important. It's just not my jam. So you need to get somebody whose jam it is and who enjoys doing that stuff, right? And so that was why I made that decision.
What are things from a culture? I know culture is important to you.
Culture, everything. Culture, strategy, breakfast, right?
Peter Drucker, right? What do you do to maintain culture?
Yeah, I think an openness to, so there's pretty much an open door policy that People can come to me with their problems or come to CEO with their problems. I think being transparent with everybody as to what the vision of the company is and where we're going. I think we have a casual approach to professionalism, and we don't have a corporate culture per se. We have a work culture, but it's not a corporate work culture. Like if you wandered around here, like there's people joking around, and we have a pretty nice office. We have a cafeteria which is custom designed to feel like a Starbucks, or like people just go and hang out and work, like so they can feel like they leave their desk and they go and work there. We are an in-office environment predominantly. I know some people would just be shaking their heads at that and go, "Well, you're behind the times," and maybe I am, but I don't know. I'm a humanist, and I believe that people need to be with people in order to maximize their potential, especially in the creative field. You can work in a silo for a bit. You can do a sprint, or you can sit in a dark room and think up ideas, and that's fine. To validate those ideas and to stress test them, you need to be doing that ongoing with other people, and you need to feed off their creative energy. And that really only happens in a room, right? So it behooves me then to create the environment whereby people can do that. And you know what? People say, "Well, what's your work from home policy?" And our work from home policy is you can work from home whenever you want. That's the policy. But you must understand that if you're working from home and you're in a creative team environment, the rest of that team is wondering where you are, because you're not contributing to the creative commons at that point. You can do it by Zoom, sure. You can do it on Slack, not really. You need to be instantly bouncing ideas off people, walking over to their desk, testing it, going back to your desk, and making mini incremental presentations as the day goes on. And that's a big part of our culture. It's not for everybody. Like I completely understand it's not for everybody, but you don't have to work here. It's not like you can go work somewhere else that's fully remote. That's fine. But if you want to work here, you're going to be predominantly in the office. It's a big part of our culture.
Let's talk about niche for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I know you.
The German philosopher, you mean, or?
Yeah,
we say niche in Canada.
Oh, niche. Sorry. Yes. I know you serve for-profits, but you also have a large segment of associations, nonprofits, and destinations.
Yep.
Talk about how you got in, how you started really focusing more, because I'm sure you can serve anyone with these services.
Mm-hmm.
Was there some point where you started to focus more on specific niches? Niche.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it happened somewhat organically and then intentionally after that. So we're based out of Ottawa, capital of Canada, smaller market, not the biggest city. But what happens in capital cities, right? A lot of government advocacy, a lot of government relations, a lot of associations and not-for-profits who are funded by government are looking to influence government. So in Ottawa alone, a city of just over 1 million people, there's 600 associations, right? So it's a big industry. And in and around that, there's non-government organizations as well. And there's crown corporations, and they all have significant budget, and they all have problems to solve, right? So we started working with a couple of associations, and we had other for-profit clients. We had like an environmental store. We still have one of the country's largest home builders, which is one of our valued clients. But so as we started working through the association world, we began to realize, well, it's pretty niche. There's a lot of specifics and nuances to developing marketing and communications programs that help these organizations. You got to understand what government relations mean. We don't do lobbying, but we work with lobbyists so that we're in line with what their driving messages are so that the whole thing is working together. And we decided to put a stake in the ground or hang out our shingle and just be that thing. And once we started to speak that language and, hire some people with specific association experience, work with partners who develop technology that's very specific to the association ecosystem. You start to gain traction and notoriety. You also start to build a ton of experience and transfer the knowledge from one association to the other association. I mean, the reality is, if you ask any executive director, president, or CEO of an association, like what are the two biggest challenges that they have? Member retention, number one. Member acquisition, number two. Those are the two things. So if you're going to help them, you need to be able to address those two things: member retention and member acquisition. So that's what we've done. The third thing they're going to talk about is, how do I influence government to either stop a policy or change a policy or develop a policy or a piece of legislation that helps my members vis-a-vis my industry. So how do you do that? Well, you try and get the public involved so that the public understands that government should change that piece of legislation or that policy, because the only thing the government really cares about is its electorate, who's going to vote for them. And they will do what the voting public want them to do most of the time. So we do member acquisition, member retention programs, public advocacy campaigns, and then we build technology into those organizations too, vis-a-vis websites, CRMs, specific data management systems, custom tools, e-commerce portals for selling services and documents and things like that. Yeah.
So you found that associations and the nonprofits and those companies were in around the city, and there was like just a rich group of those.
Yeah. This is an interesting program, if I can just talk about this for a second.
Yeah.
So this is for CREA, Canadian Real Estate Association. So this would be the equivalent of, what are they called? What are they called in the States? The Realtors Association of America or something like that. I can't remember. Yeah. So the equivalent. They're a member-based association. And they came to us, this is about maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and they said, we want to develop a program that shows our members, realtors, that we deliver value back to them as an association. And we have X amount of dollars to do it. And we want you to develop an ad campaign specifically designed to realtors to tell them that we give them value. So the first thing I went was, well, telling somebody that you give them value is not going to change their mind about whether you give them value or not. So instead, we convinced them to not do an ad program, but rather to take the money and do a cross-Canada speaking tour. So what we did was we did a very local and very specialized hour-long event, and we invited not just every realtor, but key influential realtors in these markets, brokerage owners, presidents and C-suite of local real estate associations. And we put on a show with, there's a lady whose name from Dragon's Den, Canada, Michelle Romano, and a guy, that gentleman who you saw at the podium there earlier on, Terry O'Reilly. And Terry is quite a well-known radio personality. He comes from the advertising industry, and he's a well-known radio personality. This is him. Amazing public speaker, highly engaging, and he's quite famous. So we put on this show, and we took it around Canada. We did 3 experiences in Kitchener-Waterloo, Victoria, BC, and Calgary, Alberta. And we conceived, designed, produced the show. And it was such a huge success that the organization went on and did 10 more across the country using the same format. So from that, let's do, a couple of $100,000 ad campaign, which anybody in the ad industry will know you can't do anything with that amount of money. From that request to doing a highly engaged, highly intimate, ultimately memorable experience for realtors who still talk about it to this day. So that's the type of consulting services that we deliver. It's like helping clients re-envision how to use their money to express their brand sentiment in the best possible way. Now, we would have made more money out of doing the ad campaign. It's way easier, but it's not the right thing to do. And that's why, 10 years later, we're still working with the organization because they know that we're on their side.
Last question, Tony.
Okay.
First of all, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for sharing your stories, your journey, even the embarrassing parts. And people can check out alphabetcreative.com and to learn more. But the last question is, how does Google weave into this story?
They're listening, so be careful what you say. Well, it's interesting, so 15, maybe 17 years ago, and this is a lesson for entrepreneurs and brands everywhere, is to own your IP and trademark your brand for sure. So I had heard a horror story from a colleague who's was running a services company, a consulting firm, and had registered with the local entrepreneurship bureau, the name of the company, but hadn't bothered to go into the Canadian intellectual property office and register it as a trademark. They hadn't gone through that official process, and they actually got a cease and desist from another brand who had done that, and they had to change the name of their organization. So I thought, well, hold on, like, we're called Alphabet. I've been using Alphabet for, it was probably 8 years at that point. And I'm thinking someone else is going to do this for sure. This is a pretty common word. I didn't even know if I could register it. So I went through the process of trademarking the word Alphabet as a registered trademark, the word, the logo, and all of various types in certain classes. And that was just a thing that I did as a peace of mind, I felt like I should do that thing. And then all of a sudden, across the newspaper one morning, I started getting all these emails and text messages and Facebook messages like, what are you going to do? Google is calling itself Alphabet now. So I'm like, what? So of course I look at it and immediately called my IP lawyer, and they're like, well, you're registered and you have registered in good standing, and you've also defended it against other organizations. We successfully defended it against BMW, who had a car leasing brand called Alphabet. We successfully defended it against some smaller brands as well. So we have a track record of actively defending our IP. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's Google. What am I going to do? Like, this is like, my slingshot's not going to kill that Goliath,
Right.
So anyway, so I formed a strategy, and the thing you do is you send them a letter to say it's not a cease and desist. It's more of a, by the way, we have exclusive rights to the name Alphabet, and right in our description, it says that we do internet marketing services. So what do you do? Right. And well, I was fully expecting to get completely ignored, right? As a mosquito in a windshield might. But no, we got a response. And the response was, we do not believe that we are in contradiction or to your brand. And that was it. And I'm like, well, what do we do now? So there are options available in a bit of a wait and see mode. It's, as you can imagine, like you need to start doing push-ups before you enter into that arm wrestle contest, right? So we're a small company. There's only 30 people here. I would say we would be a rounding error to Google if we had to go up against them in court. So we are entirely entitled to tell them to stop using the name Alphabet in Canada. It's not in North America, it's just in Canada. And I believe we would win that if we chose to. The question is it worth it? Right? So I'll leave it at that.
We'll have you come back and tell the story when it's
Okay.
No, but seriously, Tony, thank you. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Thanks for sharing the story of your company and the evolution. Everyone check out alphabetcreative.com to learn more, and we'll see everyone next time. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks a lot.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.